Alright, well today we're going to talk about a film which came out earlier this year. I think it's finally making the DVD rounds. And it's a movie that people were kind of reaching out to me saying, hey, have you seen this one? Have you seen it? And it was kind of it seemed to me like it was a weird suggestion for a film that I would be interested in reviewing or critiquing or analyzing. But whatever. So anyway, the name of this movie is The Angry Birds Movie. And of course, it's based on the mobile phone application from, 2011, 2010? So the fact that you have this movie coming out in 2016, they're way late to cashing in, but it's here. It already seems a little outdated, a little passé. So I was wondering why people thought that I would be interested in kind of giving this film a firm analysis. And what people have been telling me is that it's not just a cash-in on the mobile phone sensation. Oh no, this film actually has, according to some, a secret alt-right, ultra-conservative, anti-immigration message. So as soon as you hear that, you're like, okay, well now I got to give this thing a look. I want to see if you're trying to import some sort of, cryptic sort of ideology in a children's film. But because they do that, it happens all the time. A really good example of that is Zootopia, which came out earlier, which I thought was a really great movie. Which, in addition to being a CGI remake of Training Day with rabbits and coyotes, it was very much a pro sort of liberal, pro-urban supremacy, pro-multiculturalism, pro everybody lives in the city is great. If you live in the rural sticks, you're probably a racist. That was kind of the general message of the movie. They didn't come out and say it directly, but that's kind of what they were leaning towards. That's sort of the idea they're trying to kind of mash down into easily digestible form for kiddos. So with that in mind, Angry Birds is kind of sort of the political analog to that, because it's giving the opposite message from a more hard-core rights, Republican, conservative, traditionalist, nationalist narrative. But I know what you're thinking. Is this a little absurd? And I always say to that, you got to go back to Douglas Rushkoff. And for those who don't know, Douglas Rushkoff is a guy who wrote a book in the early 1990s called Media Virus, in which he kind of said, if you're a marketer, if you're someone trying to kind of get a point across and you're in the entertainment medium, sort of doing these sugar-coated political, sociological messages in children's programming is a good way to kind of get your stuff out there. Because if you come out and say it directly, well then obviously you're kind of going to get hammered for trying to politicize things. But in Rushkoff's book, he said, if you watch, the old Pee Wee Herman show, and you watch Ren and Stimpy, then clearly it's trying to kind of normalize the LGBT perspective. And that sounds crazy, but he puts a pretty good argument for why they're trying to kind of sort of extrapolate that culture and making it sort of youth-centric, so they kind of make their own minds, and of course theories, there's millions of them, is later on, when they grow up, the kids are a little bit more open to certain messages that perhaps they wouldn't be open to if they didn't expose to them when they were kids. So, that brings us to Angry Birds. So, the movie starts off, and you can kind of tell by the time they start playing, Paranoid by Black Sabbath, that it's not going to be your atypical kids movie. And it's just pretty sort of against the grain, as far as most children's movies nowadays, which I think are really kind of trying to promote a very obvious, pro-diversity, pro-globalization message. This one focuses on a guy, and the first half of the movie is kind of like that old Michael Douglas movie, Falling Down, except the protagonist is like a giant red bird with huge eyebrows. But anyway, that's our main character, and he's like a delivery man, and he's out to deliver an egg, and he, messes up, and he's ordered to go to court-sanctioned anger management lessons. And it's there you meet the rest of the troop. You meet like this psychopathic ADD bird who likes to poop on cops. There's a guy who is literally explosive, like he gets so angry he blows up, but somehow he reassembles himself. It's crazy. There's another bird, just a giant red guy, who's actually voiced by Sean Penn, which I think is brilliant stunt casting. If you know anything about Sean Penn, he has a reputation for beating up the paparazzi. And also allegedly Madonna. So, very inspired casting there for sure. So anyway, they all get together. And sort of the big plot twist for it, and there's some subtle signs, like the mayor, this guy's kind of pushing a multiculturalism message, and the main character, or every main character is supposed to relate to, he's kind of looking at modernity. He's making fun of hippies. He's making fun of all these new age people. He's kind of seeing through the message, and he's kind of critical. He's a little suspicious. Everybody else is a little bit sort of naive. So anyway, the pigs show up and they destroy his house. So he has a very direct reason for not liking the pigs. Before we get into the sort of furtive sociological undercurrents of the movie. So the pigs show up and they destroy his house, and they're doing like this song and dance number. And that is, they're trying to like kind of cajole the birds and like let them stay. And they say there's only going to be 2 of them at first, and then the birds find out there's actually like hundreds of them on the ship. They just want to stay and soak up the resources and not really assimilate the culture. And at that point, then I can kind of start to see what everybody's been telling me about. That maybe, just maybe, there's a bit of a anti-globalization, anti-multiculturalism, maybe anti-Islamification message. I don't know. It's kind of hard to get to the nuts and bolts of it. And it's going to get weirder, trust me. Hold on, we haven't gotten the weird part yet. The thing about the pigs is, now this film was made, since it's CGI, it's actually a USA and Finland joint production, which is sort of unusual to have that kind of going on. So most of the work for the script was done in the US, and the rest of it was kind of exported over to Europe. Finland, obviously, having some things going on with immigration. Maybe not as much as some of the other nation states in Europe. So there could have been some sort of furtive, sort of aesthetic influence of the immigration crisis on the art development of the movie. But like I said, obviously it's being scripted by the U.S., so it'd be in their court and not the guys over in Finland animating it. Regardless, the pigs, there's no way around it. The pigs, they look like caricatures of Middle Eastern people. I mean, they have very sort of Arabian beards. They have eyebrows, which are very, both the birds and the pigs, actually, come to think of it. Everybody has a unibrow. So, I mean, the idea that, that it's just a coincidence that they kind of bear some stereotypical facial features, there might have been something to that. That probably wasn't just happenstance. And so anyway, as the movie rolls along, the birds, everybody in the community except for the angry birds, the titular group, who's kind of suspicious. He thinks that maybe they might have sort of a hidden agenda with the pig people. Of course, pig people do. They end up just completely wrecking the entire village, and they steal all of the eggs because they want to have a giant omelet party back in their home country. So they come over to Birdland. They take all the resources, they steal the eggs, they leave it in ruins, they destroy their culture. And that's when everybody in town's like, okay, we should listen to the Angry Birds to begin with. What do we do? And from there, the rest of the movie, of course, is just like a half hour of the birds getting revenge and taking out the pigs. And it's everything you expect it to be. Now, here's the crazy thing about this movie. If you go and watch this movie, don't be surprised. Donald Trump is in the Angry Birds. I mean, for real, it has to be. This is not a coincidence. It had to have happened. There's a character who's like a bald eagle, who is like some like mystical representation of everything that makes Birdland great. And he's like the most stereotypical America kind of like creature ever. He's like a bald eagle, but he has like a very Donald Trump-like coif. And like everything around him is just absolute, just like America excess, like thumping, like jingoism and patriotism. It's like Chuck Norris everywhere. It's like this hyper patriotism, and he's the guy who's supposed to save all the birds. He's the great mentor who's supposed to show the rest of the birds the error of their ways and how to make Birdland great again. It's bizarre. Like the entire time I'm watching, I'm like, this really could not have been accidental. So maybe it is pro-Trump propaganda, maybe it isn't. I'm just saying it's very, very bizarre that it kind of happened that way. So as for the movie itself, is all of this like actually like intentional? Are we reading way too much into it? I mean, is it really like some sort of furtive commentary about the mass immigration in Europe? Is it even kind of racist against Islamic individuals? that's kind of in the eye of the beholder. I think clearly this movie does have some sort of bent to it. I mean, it has a very certain attitude, the same way Zootopia would definitely have the pro-diversity, pro-globalization angle. I think it's pretty clear Angry Birds does not have that. It has a very sort of cynical, a very sort of suspicious, kind of a critical take on all the stuff going on. And I think that's sort of anathema to most of the animated kids flicks we have nowadays. Maybe it's a good message, maybe it's a bad message, depends on your political ideology, but at least it's something different. We're getting a different perspective out there instead of the usual stuff we're used to. But yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of, you really, really, really have to grasp for straws to think that the movie is like supposed to be like Trump agitprop, that's supposed to be like some alt-right pleasing propaganda. I mean, I can kind of see why, if you look at the film, if you want to import your own personal political ideals upon it, you can probably do that. But I mean, by that same token, I mean, you could also read it as like maybe like a metaphor for, tensions in the West Bank, with maybe the pigs being Palestinian and the birds being typical Jewish settlers, maybe even vice versa. Maybe the birds themselves are supposed to be the Palestinian Muslim people, and the pigs are actually representative of the Jewish settlers who are oppressing them with their new technology. So I mean, really, like I said, that's the problem with a kids film. When you have sort of a template that open, you can pretty much put whatever you want into it. So if you want to see the film as hardline, nationalist, anti-immigration propaganda, you can probably see it that way. If you want to see it as like anti-Semitic, you can see it that way. If you want to see it as anti-Islamic, you can see it that way. If you want to see it as pro-Palestinian, you can probably see it that way too, because that's the thing about films that are meant to be interpreted. You can see it pretty much however you want, and I think your perspective on Angry Birds will be more or less formed by whatever your guiding political precepts are heading into it. So just my thoughts. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a pretty entertaining little movie. It was a little bit different from most stuff out there. I think it makes a great pairing with Zootopia, and if nothing else, you kind of see two movies taking on the pro-globalization and the anti-globalization message and trying to sort of parse that down into much kids can eat. But yeah, I enjoyed it. It's a pretty entertaining little movie. Is it propaganda? Is it supposed to kind of get kids to be suspicious of different people? I don't know. That's really up to you to decide. But overall, I thought it was a pretty good little movie. And nothing else. It's fun to watch it and dissect and come to your own opinion. So if you get a chance to watch it, I say watch it. It's surprisingly great.